Do you feel ready to retire, but think you're still a few years away from being financially able to? In this video today, we're going to talk about 9 ways you can move your retirement date up. Let's get into it. Number 1, if it fits your situation, a split retirement where one spouse continues to work while the other retires can allow you to move up your retirement date much sooner than if you both needed to retire at the same time. This is typically most effective when one spouse really dreads their job and the other is fairly positive on theirs. In many cases, a couple can fund most, if not all of their income need solely from one spouse that continues to work. Now, it's worth noting this does not come without a cost. For the spouse retiring, it will be a harder transition to retire completely on your own. It's much more fun having a partner in retirement. It's also easy for the working spouse to become frustrated at times if they're not completely on board with the decision. Number 2, downsize or move. One of the easiest and clearest ways to stretch your money further is to move away from a high cost of living area to a lower cost of living area. I recently just recorded a video that I'll link up here that compared a few of the recent top retirement destinations, but on the screen I have a snapshot of a comparison of a comfortable retirement between both New York and South Carolina. Now, New York is effectively 33% more expensive than South Carolina for retirees. If your retirement date is 5 years away and you want to move that retirement date up closer, it's worth looking at what effect a move or downsize can have. This goes for workers too, now that work from home is more commonplace. One of the biggest arbitrages a worker can use is working for a bigger company, earning a big city salary, than living in a lower cost area in a smaller town or some distance outside of the city. Your dollar will go a different distance depending on where you live. Number 3, consider what is important to you and whether the cost to achieve it is worth it. And let me say, this might not be a solution for everyone. And I'm not someone who will tell you that money won't make your life better. It most definitely will. But at times I find soon-to-be retirees put together a budget or income target that is beyond what they actually spend when they get into retirement. This is either because they're being too conservative and building in a buffer, or they're just overestimating the amount they will actually spend on, let's say, travel or other discretionary expenses. Too often, I find a retiree feels they need to have complete certainty in reaching all of their goals, essential spending, discretionary, and legacy goals before they pull the plug and retire. And that's fine if you're in that camp. But remember, it comes with a cost. It's worth asking yourself what life would look like if you were constrained at any given level. For instance, let's say you could only afford to fund your essential spending. On a daily basis, what would that life look like? What things do you like to do most? If I look at, let's say, my personal list, I find that most of the things that bring me the most joy, like hiking with my wife and dogs, are effectively free. I just need time. And so if we look at your plan and we look at retiring today versus 3 years from now, you might have your essential needs covered in both scenarios. It might only be the discretionary income or legacy goals that are maybe a bit more at risk. If you value your time more than you value being able to spend a couple $100 more per month, it might be worth considering pulling the plug early. Number 4, use the 4% rule, but use it custom to your situation. What do I mean here? Many of you watching this video are familiar with the 4% rule. It was created after a study done in the mid-90s by a financial advisor who was trying to figure out how much he could tell his clients they could safely spend from their portfolio in retirement. So what he did was look at historical data and looked at a 30-year retirement, and then looked at the worst possible time someone could have retired historically, which would have been 1966. He then looked at how much they could afford to spend from their portfolio in this worst case scenario, and that happened to be 4%. So the 4% rule came to be. It's effectively a worst case scenario study. It's a very interesting study, but unfortunately does not have real world application because it leaves out some important assets like Social Security or pension income, or only uses one time horizon like 30 years. With a bit more data and calculation, the idea behind the 4% rule can be applied to your situation so you can see what the actual worst case scenario spending would have meant historically. For instance, let's look at safe withdrawal rates looking at 2 different Social Security filing strategies. Now, this couple may be thinking they need to work a little bit longer because they want to spend $10,000 per month in retirement, which would be about a 6% withdrawal rate on their portfolio. In reality, when we work Social Security into this equation, we see their worst case scenario historically is actually right in line with their goals. And so some are delaying retirement simply because they don't have a strong plan that gives them the confidence to retire. Number 5, this is another planning focused insight. I see a lot of people will look at delaying retirement until 65 so that they are on Medicare, and it makes healthcare planning much more simple. They might look at their COBRA insurance premiums being a couple $1,000s per month and just simply can't stomach the costs. Well, know that there are alternative options that you have on this front. For instance, take Affordable Care Act insurance. There are things you can do to control how much income you report to the government in order to earn larger subsidies. This will allow you to live on a 6-figure income but report a much lower income and thus pay very little for health insurance. There are other early retirement decisions like tapping your accounts before 59 and a half that most people simply delay retirement rather than finding other strategies or options. And so make sure that you have the data on what your best options are before deciding the best time to retire. Number 6 is one that is almost never used. In retirement planning, the biggest question that needs to be answered is how long we need to plan for. If I knew the exact day you were going to pass away, all of this planning would be a whole heck of a lot easier. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a longevity crystal ball of any sort, but many retirees enter the planning process and use what I'll refer to as naive estimates at best. Maybe they use average longevity tables, or they use ages that relatives passed away at as their best guess for their situation. It's worth considering if you are preparing for retirement to get more in-depth health testing done. Go beyond the normal doctor visits and get in-depth blood and genetic testing done. There are specific genes that, if you have, make you more likely to get, let's say, dementia, for instance. A strong case could be made to see your risk factors broken out more in depth. What if, after these assessments, you find that you're a lot less healthy than you originally thought? We probably shouldn't be building a plan around you living into your 90s unless you are going to make some major changes. And as we move your potential passing age up, your spending capacity obviously increases. This could be a factor in allowing you to retire sooner, or it could also increase the motivation to retire sooner. Number 7, one of the biggest risks a retiree has in spending from their portfolio is sequence of return risk. Big portfolio losses early in retirement lead to an increased risk of running out of money. On the screen, I have a $1.2 million portfolio invested in 70% stocks and 30% bonds from 2006 through 2010. Now, if this person filed for Social Security right away, it might turn out completely fine in the grand scheme. It might feel good that they're taking income right away and spending less from their portfolio. But Social Security earns more as you delay it. It will often lead to a much safer retirement to wait and turn on Social Security once a big glaring reason, like let's say a portfolio loss, arises. The portfolio on the screen still grows even after taking $75,000 of withdrawals during the first couple years before 2008. It's during the market volatility that sequence of return risk starts to grow. Turning on Social Security in the midst of 2008 or in the early part of 2009 would give your portfolio a ton of relief, especially with a bigger Social Security benefit. And this can make a lot more sense and still allow you to file fairly early in retirement, but still minimize sequence of return risk. Minimizing sequence of return risk early in retirement means that retirement becomes much safer. Number 8, I find many retirees overassume their spending needs, which leads them to assume they are in a worse position than they truly are. They think that if they want to spend $8,000 per month in their 60s, they will continue to need that each and every year, but simply adjusted to inflation. But that's not really what the retirement research shows at all. Spending drops as you age, and this makes sense. As you are healthy and able, your spending will reflect this. Those in their 80s simply spend less on average because they're less able to use that discretionary income. And so if you go back to our 4% rule study that we showed a little bit earlier, the difference in using flat inflation-adjusted spending versus using spending that accurately reflects the path most retirees take, we see a big gap in the amount of money one can spend today. A big gap in spending can potentially lead to one retiring earlier than expected while still maintaining their realistic spending goal. Then lastly, a middle option between full-time work and full-time retirement can be a great way to partially retire early. If you're willing to work part-time or your current company allows for a more customized work schedule, this can be a great way to inch closer to retirement and still gain some time freedom immediately. Remember, binary thinking like all in or all out can often hamper retirement plans. The best options typically are in the middle of the spectrum, and they can allow for much better results and can match your retirement goals much more accurately. There you have it, 9 ways to move your retirement date sooner than maybe you previously thought. Let me know if there are any ideas that you have that I might have missed in this video. And if you're someone that is debating whether retirement is all it's chalked up to be, watch this video right here where I discuss 8 reasons you should retire as soon as you can. Click here to learn more, and always remember, you don't need more money, you need a better plan. We look forward to seeing you in the next video.